This was a really great collaborative effort between myself and Lieutenant Springer. And it just shows why it's really great that we have this team here with Lieutenant Springer, that we have the opportunity, since we have the offices here in the township, to work together and really do some other things like work together on the police levy. So it worked out really well. So where we wanted to start, we're going to kind of go through this together, is looking at where we're currently at with our police levy. Right now we have a 2.25 mil levy, and it brings in about 1.5 million. And our current contract cost is 1.571 million. So already you see that we're behind the 8 ball. Our costs in schools, the contract is actually $64,000. The board pays that up front. We're reimbursed by the Plain Local School Board. The total cost is about 1.6 million. I put we're about $91,000, almost $92,000 short. It's much larger than that because it does not include vehicles, repairs, any equipment, anything else that comes up in the life of that contract. I want to point out that in the last several years, maybe 4 years, we've purchased over 10 vehicles at a cost of $50,000 fully equipped, so that's $500,000 that's come out of the general fund. We were fortunate in the past that we had the estate tax funds, so that didn't seem as painful. We could use that money to pay for those vehicles and for the contract. But now that's been gone, and we do make at least one full payment from the general fund for that policing contract. So you can already see we're in the negative where we stand right now with our contract. So I just wanted to give you that cost right up front.
When you really start talking or asking the question, how many deputies are enough, there are 4 general procedures or processes in which that's done. First off is going to be an authorized strength. So it's a budget-driven process. We know that we have X many number of dollars, and that's going to equate to a Y number of deputies. The next thing we have is minimum staffing. And that's typically done through contractual negotiations involving the unions. What also occurs with this is a high overtime cost. So what happens is the employees kind of figure out, if I call off today and my buddy's on an RTO or a time off day, he'll get called in on overtime to fill my spot. And then tomorrow, he can call off, and I'll come in on overtime to fill that spot. So that's kind of not a good way to approach it either. The third way is going to be a population ratio. Those are based on FBI statistics. What they do is they pull similar-sized police agencies, and they take a look at how many residents there are per deputy or cop working. And the fourth one, and the one we're going to kind of mostly speak about tonight, is going to actually be a workload analysis. And that's community generated. So that specifically looks at how many people either residing in the township, working in the township, or driving through the township pick up the phone and call the police and ask for services. If we look back at the past, we actually have done a completed workload analysis for Plain Township. That ran from October of 2013 through October of 2014. We realized from doing that workload analysis that it took 12 people just to answer the workload, those calls that the citizens made for assistance. We're not talking about any type of proactive work. We also previously spoke about a perspective or a management style. And the first one was the rule of the thirds, or the third rule. That means that a third of the time the deputies spend responding to the call and writing a report. The other third of that would then be the deputy being able to follow up on the report and do investigative work considering the reports that he's taken or she is taking. The last third of that rule would be for the officer to be able to have proactive investigations or proactive patrols going on, speeding concerns, driving through the neighborhoods, vacation checks, and similar type situations. That's probably the ideal, and that's where most agencies or police agencies want to be. However, in reality, there's a more popular rule, which is going to be the half rule. I'll call it the rules of the halves. The first half is the time the deputies have. They actually spend responding to calls and working on their reports. That leaves half of their time still available. And I'm going to divide that next half into 2 quarters. The first quarter of the time would be for follow-up investigations they complete, and the last quarter, involving the rules of the half, would be for the proactive patrol. Now, as we talk about how much time the deputies spend, you have to realize that this is an average over the course of a year. So that in the summer months when it's busier, they're actually spending less proactive time on patrol. Whereas in the winter months when maybe it's slower, they then would have more proactive time for patrolling. Plain Township makes up about 41% of the police activity at the Stark County Sheriff's Office. In the past, Sheriff Meyer came up with an agreement with the Board of Trustees that it was much more cost effective to pay 75% of my salary than it was to pay 40% of all the sergeant's salary. And through that negotiation is how I ended up here. The idea behind that was to get one leader in place and try and build the team and really try and have boots on the ground to make an accurate referral back to the township about what their police services should be. The span of control when we did this on day shift was as high as 1 sergeant to 19 deputies. On afternoon shift, it was as high as 1 sergeant to 13 deputies. And on midnights, it could be as high as 1 sergeant to 9 deputies. The idea behind this is to reduce that span of control and make it much more manageable so that supervision is adequately supplied in Plain Township. And this whole leadership idea of coming inside to a contracted township, we pulled similar sized agencies and they're already doing this. So kind of what we had to do was come up with a projected cost of what a deputy is going to make in 2021. And that's hard to do. So we reached out to Teresa Wilson from the Stark County Sheriff's Office Personnel Department, and she suggested that we look at a 4% annual increase. Now I can tell you certainly the commissioners nor the sheriff are ever going to grant 4-year annual increases. But we realize that there's a rising cost of health care, and we're not sure how to budget that in. So one of the other steps that were done in this projected numbers was taking the employee contribution for the health cost and putting it back on the administrators or the purse holders. We just don't know what's going to happen 6 years from now or 5 years from now and what the increase is going to be. Having said that, in 2021, the projected, or as close as we could get to, cost for a deputy is going to be about $107,000. If you're taking that rules at a half, we're looking at 21 deputies. That's going to include detective, a pop unit, people out there on patrol. We then also factored in a 3-month salary of Chad Smith. Chad Smith's the school resource officer for Glen Oak, and at the time this was done, there existed no type of agreement between the schools or the township on how that was going to be put in there. Since then, you guys have come up to an agreement, and you're splitting that cost over the summer, so the number may be slightly elevated. The total cost for 21 deputies then is about 2.2, almost 2.3. So if we look at the left-hand column, you're going to see that currently we have about 14 people on patrol, and that includes our SRO. That does not include our SRO in the school. We have a detective, and we'll talk about supervision here in a second. By going this route, you're able to increase the road patrol by 4 1/4 officers. We already have that quarter because of Chad Smith now in the most current agreement. But you're increasing it by 4 people. One of the things we learned when we did this study is that due to time off, sick time, training time, and the other ways people have time off work, that it actually takes 2 bodies to fill 1 seat in a patrol car. So it's called a relief factor. So what is a problem-oriented policing unit? Well, it's a reactionary force. So when we get the complaints on Linford and 55th or Starcliffe or Warner Church or Firestone or 36th and 37th Street east of Market, those are our active patrol areas right now, we have people available to send them to the area. Instead of being able to go out and maybe sit in front of that house for 1 or 2 days, now maybe we'll be able to lengthen that and really help look at the problems. It's going to allow us better response to citizens' concerns. It's going to have 2 people in reserve to assist with major incidents or investigations. If we hopefully don't face this, but if we were to get a shooting or some major incident, we now have a couple extra bodies to help assist in that investigation. It allows for more proactive response and increased community involvement. We are a reactionary police force at this time. Other than Detective Koenig and I attending Crime Watch meetings or homeowners association meetings, there is not really a community-oriented policing effort inside Plain Township. I think it's time to change that. A problem-oriented policing unit actually looks at the root problem behind the cause. They try and address that root problem to do away with all the other issues. They examine the trends, and they would be involved in crime prevention training throughout the township.
And before we go any further, I just want to say about the POP unit. I think we all realize in this room, and after having the talk with the trustees, coffee with the cop, that the way we're set up right now and with the staffing that we have now, when we get those complaints about speeding on Firestone, we can only send somebody over there for a few limited hours, and then they don't have the time to stay there or to monitor that. Then they have to go back and go on calls. And that's why we hear about it so many times throughout the year, because we just don't have the staff. We're so limited to stay on top of that, and that's something that prop unit would do. Yeah. So talking about the projected costs, again, we did go with the 4% annual increase. Again, it would not be as high as 4%, but this board knows we've also been in the position where several years ago we did have to lay off three sheriff officers just because of the increases. So we would rather budget conservatively here, put ourselves in the situation that at the end of a contract, we're okay to keep our manpower and not be in that position to have to lay off. So it gives the cost here of the deputies, and then you see the total cost there for the total of the supervisors. The total of the supervisors is $355,716.
As you look at that, and we'll talk about supervisors and need them in just a second or two. It's once again, this would be something you guys would enter into an agreement with the sheriff. And there may be some type of negotiations to occur there. I know that currently you guys are paying 75% of my wage, and that the sheriff needed me in my position to be available to also handle some issues or concerns for the county on an occasional basis. So there may be something you could do with this. Also, as we're talking about supervision, you may reanalyze this every couple of years, and in those right now annual agreements you come up with, or annual contracts, you could then renegotiate this, and if you want to change it for, say, the 2 detectives or 2 more deputies or whatever, there is that flexibility because of the agreement.
Yeah, because right now we do yearly contracts, and initially, you know, we do feel 2 supervisors are necessary, and Lieutenant Springer will talk about that, because we will be getting brand new deputies who will need supervision, and more so than what one lieutenant can give, and I'll let him get into this here.
So when the call volume increases, it increases pretty consistently across the county. So the same time that the call volume is heavy in Plain Township is basically the same time it's heavy everywhere else. That means those supervisors from the county who are here when I'm not here, and who the Plain Township residents depend on, may be busy doing county work, because 49% of that work's involved in the county and only 41% inside the township. So we certainly don't want to put the fire department in a position where they're waiting for a supervisor to show up on scene to be able to clear, and you have to wait for possibly a county supervisor responding from Brewster or Lexington or whatever the situation is. Because of the mass increases we create, 8 officers, 8.25 officers, you're probably going to end up dealing with less experienced officers. You know, if the township won the Powerball a couple days ago and you came to the sheriff and said, I want 8 more officers right off the bat and I want them here tomorrow, I'm going to tell you honestly, the sheriff cannot provide them that quickly. What would happen, what I foresee happening, is that the sheriff would pull out 8 deputies, start training some of them in Plain Township, and start training some of them in the county. So initially you'd have a huge influx. The problem with that being is that these officers are going to be less experienced, and as they then got broke loose and moved into the township in these permanent spots, they then would not have that supervisor available in the county to respond once again into Plain. That supervisor working for the county treats both entities equally, but has a lot of draws and pulls on them. The idea is to try and have supervisors that would stay here inside the township and be responsible only inside the township. So there may be a small administrative procedure they would have to do, and that would be checking the reports coming in through the township. Something they could do here at this office, or perhaps over at Station 3 with a little bit of sprucing up over there. They then would be available to go out on the road and handle calls. There are supervisors that stay in the township and are backed up by county supervisors, not filling in the shoes of county supervisors. They're able to see what's going on. There'll be boots on the ground. They'll be able to produce more on-the-job training and develop Plain Township deputies in what you want them to be.
And just to reiterate again, is after a year or 2, if the board's comfortable, you can reevaluate your contract and say, you know, I don't think we need 2 supervisors anymore. I think we can go down to 1 and add a deputy. You know, change 2 supervisors, 2 sergeants to 1, and switch out 1 with a deputy. So that's the flexibility of having that year-to-year contract. So just to review The deputies, the cost of the deputies, as you see up there, is $2,290,000. Adding the supervisors at $355,000 is a grand total of $2,645,862.94. Currently, again, our 2.25 mill levy brings in about $1.5 million. The 2 mill addition, and again, I don't have this, exact from the county. That's what I'm going to be asking the board to, with a resolution tonight, to get certified from the county. But based off the fire levy, would bring in approximately $1.3 million for a total of about $2,847,500.
So all this millage would come right at the same time? We're not looking at two different levies? One is the original.
No, we would be
plus the
looking at a
additional.
renewal plus an additional like we
Okay.
did with the fire levy. And you'll see on the next slide, because you have some differences in cost, we would have to, oh yeah, one of the things that will be a concern, and Chief Sabo, you were involved in those conversations, is we may at some point have to pay for dispatching. We know that's one of those areas that is unknown out there, and we don't know what that cost will be, so we do have the room in there to pay for dispatching. No idea what that cost will be. Have talked to the sheriff, have talked to Major Stantz out there. That's a great unknown. Aside from that, we'll have to purchase 8 new vehicles. On top of, as we know, we have a good fleet, but we have 4 very poor backup vehicles, which we know over time we need to replace. And then we're back into the recycling of vehicles. We've done a good job of getting them up to a nice rotation, but they've got to keep on rotating or we'll be back where we started when we all got in place. So that little bit of difference will be taken with vehicles, equipment, computers, rotating vehicles, of course the body cameras, the computers, the in-car upgrades, and then for the POP unit, and then the staff training.
So if you take a comparison of the current state, we've got 1 supervisor, it's going to be myself, detective, and 14 on patrol. We have 0 community policing. The future state is projected to be, once again, the hope would be to add 2 sergeants exclusive of Plain Township, 18 people on patrol, and a 2-person POP unit. Total gain of 8 people. It says 8.25 law enforcement officers up there. It's because Chad Smith wasn't included when this was done.
Hey,
Yes, sir.
just a quick question on the POP unit. I mean, that wouldn't just be 2 people that are exclusive to that. That would be, that POP unit could consist of any of the deputies within, assigned to the
That's
township?
a good
or what's
question,
your,
and we talked about that.
My vision for that, and obviously it'd be up to to you guys as trustees, but my vision for that is 2 people exclusively assigned to that unit, and they will work for direct control underneath me. So the road sergeants wouldn't be really using them. By that I mean if we had a call off, we would replace that by other means and not affecting that POP unit. That POP unit, the problem-oriented policing unit, is meant to plug into the hot spots. Let's say Deputy Koenig has a very extensive investigation. We can look at the field deputy that took that initial call and say, do you want to work with the detective and continue following this case for the next week? In that case, I could take that POP unit person and backfill. If the road deputy were to say no, then I have that POP unit person to be able to handle that. These are the people that would actually go to crime prevention specialist training school. They become certified crime prevention specialists. So they're going to be people who are really going to be more up in the forefront as far as the homeowner association meetings, the crime watch meetings, and looking at the root cause of the problem to try and solve the problem. For example, with Firestone Road, constant speeding complaint multiple times every year. Deputy Smith is pretty busy in the schools as an SRO, but maybe we start looking at who is actually driving that way from the school. And maybe we start contacting some of those parents or reach out to the school staff themselves and say, can you tell these kids they need to slow down? Because that's where the speeders are coming at on Firestone. It's from the school kids. That's the majority of them.
Firestone, Kings Creek,
yeah.
Bobbleland,
Absolutely.
pretty much
Yeah.
anywhere.
We've got the list because we get it every year because we don't have the answer.
So it's about finding creative and new ways how to think outside the box and address the problem and fix the problem long term.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So now we've did a lot of work on community comparisons, so the board could see how we compare currently and in the future state with our neighboring communities. So we'll start with North Canton. And this is comparing law enforcement officers per population. And they have approximately 1 law enforcement officer per every 972 people. As you know, they're based on a city income, and their population is 17,496. They have 18 full-time law enforcement officers with 1 chief, 1 lieutenant, 5 sergeants, 2 detectives, and 9 patrol officers. The city of Greene is 1 per 1,388 with 25,699 as their population. They have 18 full-time law enforcement officers and 1 part-time, 1 sergeant, 17 patrol officers, and they have 1 person doing direct indictments.
Just as a quick side note to point out, as we look at the population in North Canton, in a few slides we're going to see Plain Township's population. We're almost double them, slightly more than double perhaps. So if they're at 18, the target number would be 36 if you double their staffing size, and that was kind of what that whole theory of the thirds was behind, and we're not really going that route here.
No. If you look at Jackson Township, they're 1 law enforcement officer for every 936 people, and their millage is 5.75 mils. Their population is 40,286. They have 43 full-time law enforcement officers and 11 part-time. They have a chief, a major, 2 lieutenants, 4 sergeants, 6 detectives, 2 juvenile service, and 38 patrol officers. And then to compare to Perry Township, they're 1 law enforcement officer per every 1,268 at a 3.74 millage with 29,167 citizens and 23 full-time law enforcement officers, 1 part-time, 1 chief, 3 detectives, 3 sergeants, and 16 on patrol. Okay, Liberty in Butler County is very similar to Plain Township. You selected Liberty. Do you want to touch on that, why you selected Liberty?
Well, Butler County Sheriff's Office is one of the best sheriff's office. I'll say second to Stark County Sheriff's Office. But anyway, one of the most premier sheriff's office in the state of Ohio. Liberty Township is very similar to Plain. It's slightly more affluent in the fact that the median household income is higher than that of Plain, and they have a much larger commercial area. So they're able to kind of cover what they do with 3 mills, but population size is kind of right on.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to note. If they have a lot more business than Plain Township does, that's why 3 mills gets them more than our millage gets them. But at 3 mills, their population is 37,000. They have 24 full-time, 1 lieutenant, 2 sergeants, 3 detectives, and 18 on patrol. So right now in Plain Township, we have 1 law enforcement officer for every 2,190. And I think our pre-state is the highest. We're looking at adding 2 mills, which would be 4.25 mills, which would bring us to 1 for every 1,445. Our population is 35,040. The state that we'd want to get to, so this is with the 4.25 mil levy, we would have 24.25 full-time law enforcement officers with 1 lieutenant, 2 sergeants, 1 detective, a 2-person pop unit, and 18.25 patrol. So as you can see, that's similar to Liberty. We're still on the high side, though, in the law enforcement officer per population, but similar in the other aspects.
It's probably good to have a little bit of wiggle room in those numbers that we had in the millage, and once again, if the board decides to go forward, we'll be able to get some more exact numbers. But we certainly don't want to be in a situation where you'd have to lay off several deputies again and decrease the level of service to Plain Township residents by doing so. And we just don't know what's going to happen with the housing market or with the commercial market and how much revenue it's going to generate. So to kind of briefly explain this in a nutshell, what's this mean? This is our current schedule and kind of where we're running. So on day shift, we actually have 3 people total assigned, but based on days off, it kind of fluctuates who's actually working. There's a day shift overlap position. Guy comes in at 11 o'clock. We have a noon. This is more of an afternoons overlap position. He comes in at 12 o'clock noon on the money. We have an afternoon shift. We have an overlap from midnights or between midnights and afternoon shift. We have one person assigned to that. They start at 8 p.m. And then we have our midnight shift. So when the moon and stars and everything aligns up and everyone's working 5 days on and 2 days off and nobody's in training, sick, out with maternity leave or paternity leave or anything else, these are our numbers we have working on a daily basis currently in Plain Township. We have an unofficial minimum staffing. When I say unofficial minimum staffing, it means I don't want to drop below this number, because if we drop below these numbers, I cannot adequately provide police services to Plain Township. So that minimum staffing, not to be confused with how you determine staffing, is 2 on days, 3 on afternoons, and 2.5 on midnights. The future state, if we're able to get this levy through, and if the residents of Plain Township decide they want a better level of service than they have right now, this is what it would look like. So typically what I'm doing is increasing an overlap car, because I'm trying to get the staffing here when the high call volume exists. It makes more sense to have more police working when there's more demand for them. And once again on afternoon shift, and once again on an overlap shift. So to compare currently, on Sunday night we have 10, we move to 12. Monday and Tuesday we have 9, we have 11 and 13 respectively. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday we have 10. We're going to 13, 13, and 14. Saturday we have 11. Saturday we'll be going to 15. That allows me to take that minimum staffing, increase it on day shift, afternoon shift. Midnights would stay close to the same. Realistically, they're still going to have the overlap cars, so they're still going to be there. This may actually jump up to a 3. That does not include, these numbers do not include the bold ones at the bottom. It does not include the 2-person pop unit, the 2 sergeants, or the deputy you would pick up over the summer. So during the summer months, when it's the busiest for the township, you have 5 extra people to plug in the holes.
Any questions by the board?
So we actually gained
8 people.
6, but we gained 6 days where we actually have overlap.
So the 4 bodies would be placed on the overlap shift. So if we look at our numbers across top, 2s and 3s, that doesn't change. Numbers here change because I'm picking up 2s. Numbers here change because I'm picking up 2s. I'm picking up 1 on the afternoons, and I'm picking up 1 on the overlaps. So that's the 4 deputies that immediately would hit that road patrol. And that total gain, that net gain of 8 people, doesn't include the 2-person pop unit, the 2 sergeants, or the summer deputy.
Mr. Fiscal Officer, CPA, any question on the numbers? I mean,
No, I think it all makes sense, and it was a really thorough presentation.
We didn't present, we presented the 2 mills because we did do the numbers for the other ones, and we wanted the board to be in a situation where they were not faced with a layoff that they were faced years past. And this is a situation where we felt that there could be the purchases of the vehicles could come out of the police fund. The school resource officer could come out of the police fund.
be self-sufficient.
Yes, all of the repairs, all of the equipment, the $500,000 that came out in the last 4 years could over time come out of the sheriff's levy. So we feel good with this proposal.
Do we have a projection on the cost of vehicles over the lifetime of the new levy? Is that a 3 or a 5 year?
It's a 5-year levy.
So do we have a cost? Because obviously we're going to have to pick up another couple more vehicles.
We know that we need 4 in our spares, and we would need,
The short answer to that's going to be no.
yeah.
However, you'll see that on these projected costs for 2021, there is a $2,000,
200,000.
200,000, which would, at the current rates, would be 4 new vehicles.
Yeah.
So the idea of some of that money up front, because deputies would not immediately be available to come out.
So we'd have money up front to purchase some
And the
vehicles.
reality is,
Well,
based upon that.
That's going to happen every year.
Yeah.
So that 200,000 is going to, over that 5-year period.
Yeah,
that's-
Well, you're gonna be-
that'll-
that part of that's gonna have to go
$1 million.
towards obviously
Yeah,
replacing.
that's why we did that. We-
Existing cruisers
existing
and current
cruisers
man
and current.
numbers,
Mhm.
plus figuring the cycle that, and the reality is, I mean, dispatch is gonna end up being paid for at some point,
some
based
point.
upon the SCOG meetings I've been in attendance at, so, you know, in the past,
We just couldn't project a number,
Yeah.
and we didn't want to come up with something that just was not true. It is just, nobody has.
That'd be pure speculation.
Yeah, it'd be all speculation, and we didn't want to speculate.
yeah.
But we felt we had enough of a cushion for at least 5 years.
Now, I mean, obviously outside of the board addressing, you know, requests of the auditor during our normal business meeting, should we, you know, ultimately look to move as a board on putting this on the ballot in the fall, I think it'd be wise that we do another coffee with a cop, talk with the trustees.
And we felt that when we put this.
To help educate,
yes.
because I mean, this is a lot of good information,
Mhm.
but I mean, for the average person, one, to take the time to find it, let alone digest it and know what other assumptions and factors roll up into those numbers.
Yeah,
Would be.
yeah. And we'll also, after we have the valuation back from the auditor, we can put it in terms of, you know, tax valuation of a $100,000 home, what it'll cost you as a homeowner.
Yeah.
We can get that kind of information too. But we can scale this however the board would like to do it, any homeowners presentations, anything that the board would like done.
Okay. John, do you have anything on
No,
that?
I'm good for now, but I think futuristically, first step we take is to get that.
Certified.
Yeah, because we merely went off of what the millage was certified for the fire levy. It's, I'm sure similar, but that's just what we went off
I
of.
was gonna say with the additional.
670,000
additional
a
increase
mil.
in households that we're
Yeah.
continuing to see
Mhm.
build out,
Yeah.
have a slight. Guys, thanks for the.
Thank
Yeah,
you very
thank you.
much.
effort.
Thank you.